Yeah, again, like Blair said, thanks everybody for joining us. We appreciate that. Yeah, we did want all the judges to be part of both sessions. We're pretty much the music and visuals is going to be inseparable. You know, visually, we've been pretty strong on that, understanding what's being played while we're watching the visuals. So we want to get a little more strength on the music side, that we also have that same kind of understanding what they're doing visually and how that might, you know, enhance or inhibit some of the musical things they're doing. So if you see something like that visually, that's making them play the music not as well as he should be, you should be commenting on something like that. So we want to make sure you're aware of that. Again, we have Mike Turner with us again, who's going to kind of go over some things. I sent you a couple of papers to have available. So hopefully you have those available on your computer. And I will introduce my good friend, Michael Turner.
Morning, everyone. Yes, I sent out 2 papers for you that I put together. These are yours. I know it's really, really tiny. In fact, I'm trying to decide whether I should wear glasses or not when I look at it.
Get mine.
Let me tell you why I did this and what my thought process was based on how we discussed how we handled last week without me putting. You know what? To be honest with you, I started this out going, I'm going to show, I have my computer is sitting on the book that I was actually going to use, pictures of these amazing bodies in different positions and stuff. And then I would say, this is this position, this is it. You don't need that, I don't think. But what I did was I put together, based on what I've seen on the field, some thoughts on one sheet, and it starts out with the definition of a choreographer at the top of choreography. And then the other sheet I put together specifically for instructors or directors, which is technically a class. You could use this in a classroom. This is what I would do. If you asked me to come in and to teach a class to help your guard instructor get on, or your band director, not say, I'm going to say color guard when I mean the whole group, the whole ensemble. This is the page that you would use. And we'll talk about that a little bit later when I'm talking to the people who are actually sitting in front of the band. And one of the reasons, I'm going to talk in circles and you're going to help me bring it back together. The reason years and years and years and years ago that I actually started bringing everybody together in the morning, this was the brass, the winds, the color guard, the front, the pit even, which they would do. Did they ever complain? We don't do that stuff. But it was the only time during the day that everybody in the entire group was doing the exact same thing, being charged and challenged with the same responsibilities, with the same exercises. And to me, it helped solidify the cohesiveness and the camaraderie and the ability to work together and the respect that one section had for another, which, you know, again, some of this is a little bit antiquated because I started doing this a gazillion years ago, but it's all very, very current. When I started judging myself, I was teaching the Madison Scouts at the time, but I was also dancing. I started dancing at the same time, and I'll just briefly tell you this. That was my whole success at the time, because I started doing layered responsibilities before it ever appeared on a score sheet anywhere. And at the time, there were 3 other people around the country that were doing the same thing. Stanley was in the Pacific Northwest, Stacy Lynn was doing the Blue Devils, and Scott Chandler was still on the East Coast, I think, at the time working with Bridgman. And but we started doing that. Now, what for me at the time became a very comfortable way of speaking, and that's what I want you all to write down. You need to have your way, your tongue of speaking. But the most efficient and the fastest way for me to talk when I was, you know, talking into a tape recorder or dragging it behind me or whatever we were doing at the time, a reel to reel, was to use dance terminology, which freaked people out. they would come to me and critique and say, you're using all these big words. We have no idea what this means. Why, you're saying we're doing this, you're saying we're doing that, which I always thought, well, I'm complimenting you, to be honest. But why I say this is antiquated a little bit is because now everybody's taking ballet, and everybody knows what a jeté is, and everybody is using that terminology. So it's sort of caught up. It's something that we now expect of judges. Instructors expect that of you. In fact, and I know a great many of you are instructors and judges. I've clarified that with Juno. My phone did a thing over there. Your phones are going to go off too while we're talking, because you're going to be chatting with each other. But you as instructors know that if you're going to spend the time investing in this type of training, you're going to want it to be recognized. You're going to want someone on the other side to say what they're seeing. I've changed, and I constantly change the way I refer to people or to what I'm seeing. I'll give you an example of something that I've spent a good amount of time in this quarantine reading and looking at a lot of dance stuff, because it's a sickness for me, to be honest with you. I'm thinking that I have an addiction. I think most of us do. We might want to have later on, let's have another webinar and talk about how we're going to deal with that addiction to color guard a marching band, because I know a good many of you out there, I'm seeing these names that are going to be in my meeting. But I started thinking about just looking at a jump, 2 feet to 2 feet. On this sheet, it's called a soubresaut. Now, if you just say a jump, when we'll get to this, that should be enough. But I'm thinking, I need to start thinking more about the descent. What is happening when the body is coming down like this, as opposed to when it's going up? Because I had always been thinking about that motion. And then I started thinking, well, maybe I should think about this and what that has the possibility of doing. So descent has been a new word for me to think about, and what's occurring when gravity sort of takes over and brings the body down. Gravity is a word that you're going to want to use, because we do need to talk about and acknowledge those expressive effort qualities, which I hope I have on here. If not, they're on the other sheet, but both of these sheets are yours. And I just wanted you to know how the two fit together. One, I kind of geared a little bit more to the judge, as far as what, again, I've been seeing on the field, and the fact that a lot of people are playing while they're doing these things, undoubtedly doing equipment work. The two, I haven't used this word in a long time because I don't always see it. And I would caution you to not use words unless, or to give a false sense of success unless it is absolutely true. Now, the word I'm talking about is symbiotic. This was something, bless her heart, Shirley Whitcomb was on years ago. And I have to find my own way of knowing what symbiotic is, just like I have to find my own way about what organic is. I had an organic moment just a minute ago before we went live, and I can tell you what that was if you remind me. But symbiotic is where, let's talk about equipment for right now, where the body and the equipment are so engaged with each other that one could not survive without the other. And it's kind of like if you've ever seen a nature show where they show like a rhinoceros, and there are bugs all over their backs, and yet there are birds that are eating these bugs. That's an example of the bugs need to be on the rhinoceros for whatever reason, and the birds need to eat. So there's a living thing that's happening between a body and the flagpole or whatever. If the back wasn't at that flat position, the flagpole couldn't roll over it, that sort of thing. I'm really cautious about seeing that. And I will acknowledge, and I say the word acknowledge, and I ask questions when I judge. I ask a lot of questions, and then in my wrap-ups, which are very short, that might be something contrary to what you've been told. But just, this is for me. I'm telling you what is working for me. I will say that I realize I've asked you a lot of questions, and I hope that as you answer those questions, I will have been of some help to you or whatever. So that's a little bit about how this came about. The fact that, early on, some of us were using terminology that now is probably just sort of second nature to you, especially if you study. Judging is tough. It's really, really a tough thing to do. Quite honestly, I don't think everybody can do it. Some of the finest dancers that are technically proficient are not great choreographers. Baryshnikov would not choreograph anything, and he would admit, I suck at this. I can't do this. Some of the greatest composers or again choreographers are not great judges. They don't know how to. They don't know how to write a critique. They don't know how to critique people. Something else that I did early on that might be helpful to you is I also read critiques in the New York Times, just reading the way that other people are critiquing a book, a dance performance, a movie, anything like that can help. You'll go, wow, I like that word. I just like the word, and I'm going to keep the word. I'll figure out how to use it at some point. I totally do that. Deborah Jowett, who was a very famous, still for the New York Times, dance critic, wrote an article in Dance Magazine last week. You got to look for it because it's really, really hidden. But she was talking about how dancers need to dance and they need to perform, and she has learned how to look on Zoom and to replay something and all of that sort of stuff as a dance critic. when what she was used to, and she describes this, was walking down the aisle, scooting into the second row off the aisle, getting out her notebook and never. And here's what I thought was interesting, because I do this when I'm judging. I don't look down, and I write these notes really fast, and I think they're going to make sense when I have to go back and look at them later. And it's total. I'm like, it's just, I don't know what this means, So I've had to sort of develop a little bit of my own shorthand. Sometimes I'll draw a vertical line with an arrow up and an arrow down. That to me references the visual dynamic of what I'm seeing, the highs and the lows. A lot of groups will hit the highs. Oh, they're up there, boy, they've got it, but they're not getting the lows. And I don't mean low as in lying on the ground. I mean low as in absorbing that vertical, that descent that I was talking to you about, in the joints and the softening and the time signature and the way that they travel. I've found that most people are pretty good at the highs, but the lows are somewhere that they could continue to explore. So whatever my shorthand is not going to mean a thing to you, and yours isn't going to mean anything to me. But I urge you to think about something, because the minute you take your eyes off of something, you're gonna miss something that they really wanted you to see. Now, I urge you to ask about any of these questions or about any of the stuff that I've put on here if you don't get it, if you don't see what I'm talking about.
Got a question, Mike?
You'd have one?
Yeah.
Yes.
So, going back to our original meeting 2 weeks ago, you were saying more about shouldn't be too concerned about the difficulty of the skill, I believe is the way we kind of phrased it. So do these all, this paper, do these have equal value in your mind? Or should we be looking at something a little, because, maybe a 6 is harder than a 4 on a rifle. Is there anything that we should be aware of on that? Like whether it's centering or gravity or whatever it may be, balance?
No, that's a great question.
I had a great teacher.
Yeah, well, the difficulty thing is there's something that I want to say, and I just don't want to, I don't want to offend. Well, let's just say it. Let's just look at it this way. Let's say that you have a rifle line out there, and there's someone with a cast on. Okay, they're still trying to do the rifle work. Now, what might be difficult for that particular performer is not particularly difficult to the ones who have both arms free. Now, I used to make a joke, and this is where I don't, well, I'm not even going to do it because I stand the chance of, but what you can do when things start to get more complicated, and I know this, is when I see people doing a more compound movement, when there's like 3 things involved. I will, like a tour jeté. You guys that have seen these, it's when someone is turning, the legs are splitting, there's a back leg line, and what people forget to do, and what I will say is the focus whipping around is going to save you. That's the third element of that. They'll delay, they'll do all of this stuff with their legs, and then their head is the last thing that comes around. Yes, that's a difficult movement. And without saying that's difficult or that's hard to do, even though I know that's hard to do, I use the word, your vocabulary is quite ambitious for where your performers are technically at this point. Now, and part of it is because difficulty is not on your sheets. If it were, I might reference it in the wrap up a little bit, but I would still go about it the same way, because you see this ambitious, a lot of people, especially I did mention this last week, when you've got young instructors and you can tell as judges, they are putting everything they ever learned in their drum corps summer onto your band show, and your kids are like, oh my God, or your young performers are like, I don't know what, and they're skipping all the stuff that on the other page that they should have mastered, before you can do a tour jeté, you have to understand alignment, placement, orientation. That's huge, judges. That's just huge. That the performers on the field, whether they have an instrument or a flagpole or a drum, knowing where their shoulders, the pelvis should be in relationship to the front or to the form. And you need to ask that. You see people coming across the front in a curvilinear, and there's always a place where they change their, the trumpets are coming here, and then they get to this place, and then they start backing around. When does that happen? Some will keep the upper body to the front, but they'll move the pelvis. They'll move the footing, but not everybody. So we're looking for differences here. Now my guess is a lot of you are pretty, did I answer your question, Juno?
Yes.
Okay.
It's just the way you say it.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. Maybe you've got a lot of young judges that predated the whole tick thing. Let me just tell you briefly the way that how our judging system came about with all of you, with all of the sheets that you use. When every group enters the field, the floor, the whatever, they used to years ago be equal, but they all had 100 points. Everybody started out with 100 points, and it was the judge's job to find things wrong. And they called it a tick. They would just put little lines on their score sheet. Now the tabulator had to count all of those and subtract it from 100. That's how the score was. That's how they came up with the score. Where things became much more evolved and more positive, and especially more educational, is when we again entered the field all equal, but with 0 points. And we as judges find everything that's right. We give credit for everything that they're doing well. We give credit for the layered responsibilities. We give credit for good technique. We give credit for all of these wonderful things that we're seeing in front of us. And that's how the score is accumulated now. It changed the way people talked on tapes, the way that you heard things. It was one of the best things that could have ever happened. And believe it or not, our scoring system has been not challenged, but has been compared to figure skating and all sorts of things. And it's like one of the best ways that you can ever evaluate anyone. Years and years and years ago, I think it was the University of maybe Kansas City or something like that. They clipped microphones on a whole bunch of us, and they did this study and all this sort of stuff. And they found that it was compared to other ways of scoring this type of activity, that we were right on. Now, are we learning and evolving? You bet we are. Sometimes there are things that you know I do. You have to go by your sheet for starters. This is what I'm getting at right now. Years ago, DCI changed. They changed their color guard sheet drastically to something that I hated. I was at the meetings when it came about, and all the stuff that a lot of you, myself included, fought for at the time that was on a color guard sheet was removed, and it became a very much like a field sheet, a tick sheet. The color guard judge could no longer give credit for color, for flag design, for costuming, for integration, for transitions, all of those things that we as color guard people wanted credit for. But did you see this? And I would say, you know what? It's not on the sheet. I can't. You're telling me that your green people are great, but I can only credit pink people. So that's the way that it goes. So you have to be true to your sheet. That's what makes band judging a little bit difficult sometimes for those of you that travel around the country. The sheets are often different. And so it's always a good idea, if you're going to travel, to get a copy of the sheets ahead of time to know what you're going to be looking for. If you show up in Oklahoma, I don't know, I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know this for sure, but you see that there's 5 boxes instead of 2, and you immediately go, oh, how am I going to keep this math straight? And one of the boxes is 5 points for spirit. There are people still doing that. You know what I do? Everybody gets a 5. Everybody gets a 5. Anybody who got off the bus gets a 5. So you're going to have to make that kind of call. And so that's just something that I would urge you to think about. Anything else before we dig into this sheet?
Yeah, if you're going to really dig into the sheet, Michael, how to separate the ensemble from effect?
To my way of thinking, the ensemble creates the effect. Is the circle a circle, or is one side of it flat? Those are things that an ensemble judge is going to look at in the development. Oh, I look at some stuff now and I go, oh boy, that was not good. You know, if it's not developing at the same speed or whatever, when right there the effect is supposed to happen, and because part of it is flat, it doesn't. Flags going up in different ways, bodies looking different under the toss, indicate to me that there's a lack of training on where the release points are, all that sort of stuff. While we can talk about it ensembly, the ensemble judge should be catching it. It has, and I will say this, if this comes across, the unclarity is affecting the effect, because while I can see what you were after, because it was not done well, the effect was not what you had hoped for it to be. If you can throw things back at people, that holds up in court. If you ever write a letter and say, unless I hear back from you, you're good. You're good. Okay. Because you've thrown the ball in the other person's court. So whenever you can do that, the field visual sheet, which you guys have, and the ensemble sheet are very much married together. You know, they're very technical. individually, that makes a lot of sense to some of us. Ensemble, it's groupings of more people. And we're also talking about, we're also gearing that more towards perhaps some of the drill designers, the musical people that are actually teaching, that are making these things come about. So it's all very married together. It's all very close. And sometimes those, I'll be honest with you, those divisions are hard. They're very hard to make. If some of you are questioning where you are as a judge and you have been predominantly on the field, I would really encourage you to think about second captioning yourself and going into the ensemble might be a great fit for you, because it's doing what you're doing up close a little bit more globally. You're looking at, you're taking more in. That's a big difference right there, from going into what's happening to pulling out a little bit and sort of seeing the whole thing. So as a judge, I would say that's pretty important there. Good.
Yes.
You know what? When I looked at this paper after the fact, as best I could read it, I'm sorry, it's very, very small. But I wanted to get it. I think I wanted to get it. Well, it's on 2 pages. If you printed the back, things aren't necessarily in order as they might be if I were going to do them in class. But I just wanted you to know about some things. Now, it's very, like I told you earlier on, I've developed my own vernacular and what I speak. You can look at this and say, because I sort of put, okay, if you look at the very first thing, a saute is a hop. It's 1 foot to 1 foot. Okay. Now we see this a lot. We see saute passe. That's where now there's always a working leg and a gesture leg. Gesture is a good word because you can use it with the air leg. You can also use it with the arms. You can use it with what's really gesture, you know. Years ago, there was a word on a score sheet. Actually, it was on the DCI score sheet. The word emotion was on there. And I fought like hell to get that word off the sheet because people would do this. And, oh, they're so emotional. I went, that's a gesture. That has nothing to do with, I don't know how can anybody know what they're feeling? That is sort of the same about difficulty. Sometimes where you have to shy away from it is you can tell the people that have been in dance class since they were 3 years old. I mean, you should be able to tell that. And so what might be a challenge to one isn't a challenge for another. So yes, the saute, you're going to have a gesture leg and you're going to have a supporting leg. You even have that when you're marching, just traveling. I don't want to get too involved in some of this that I don't get to the points of what I really want to make as far as what you're looking at. But the thing about the saute, and I put a hop there, is what I find often, and I want you to look for this, is like the back leg. People try to go too high. They're trying to go higher than is even humanly possible. And again, there's nothing on your sheets that say that is going to be difficult, only in the fact that when they land, they may break an ankle, you know. Risk is something that we look at now. An environment, and an environment not in terms of the weather forecast, but in the amount of space that's being used, ensemble, front to back, side to side. Is the drum line up in this corner and are the rifles down in this corner? And how do they, you can't see my hands, how do they hear what's going on up here? Where's the tempo coming from? And as you're on the field, and I think that visual judges, we've done a really pretty good job of knowing how to stay out of the way and not requiring that we be charted into the drill some way. So that's a plus. You know, we're not running. We see 12 rifles up front. We're going to look at it from the side, you know, which, by the way, is a great place to be when you're looking at stuff. Look at stuff from the side. You can tell if people have been doing what's on my other page or not. But I do want you to look at the saute stuff, which we see a tremendous amount of. So, passe means that the gesture leg is passing along the supporting leg. It can be parallel or turned out. Parallel, turned out. This is turned out, and this is parallel. Now, I don't want to offend anybody, but I want you to be aware of those things, because arrivals, that's the first thing I look at when I look at a form. And oh God, I can't tell you the number of band shows I judge around the country where the hem length of the pant is like, some are walking over it, and some are 6 inches above a white sock, or the socks are different colors, or the shoes are not polished. You know what? Bring that stuff up. And I want to say, this seems like a pretty easy fix to hem that, but I stay away from even using the word easy. It's the flip of difficult. I don't know. Maybe the band director has 2 people on his staff. No parents are helping fit those uniforms. And so I can't make that assessment, but I can say, you know what? It's really hard to see what the feet are doing, because there's a real uneven definition here. But arrivals, starts and stops. Arrivals, starts and stops. Those should be blaring things. When they arrive, are their feet like this? Are they like this? Are they like this? Are they like this? And say, I'm seeing some of everything here. Okay. If you go down, I already used the word supersole, but it's just a jump. 2 feet to 2 feet. There are only 5 ways possible, humanly possible, to get into the air. That's all. That's it. Unless you're being lifted by a helicopter or something like that. But, well, or an elephant or whatever. I talked about that the other week too. When we cross that bridge, we'll talk about it. So saute, supersole, a jeté is going from one leg to the other. It's a leap. It's a leap. It's like going over, not jumping over or hopping over a mud puddle, but leaping over one leg and then the other. That's what I say to little kids. The other 2 are more complicated. One is called a sisson. That's where you both feet leave and they land at different times. Okay, you go into the air, foot. Okay, and then assemblée is the feet land at the same time. It means to assemble. You might see those, but this is just for you guys to work on. I look at some choreography. And again, everything I'm talking about right now, which at one point in time we might have only thought of as being a color guard thing. Winds are doing this stuff. Some of the most incredible movement I've ever seen is coming about in the battery. It's crazy. Tempo is another thing that I would consider under risk. I talked to you a little bit about that. Moving at 280 beats a minute or whatever, that's speed, tempo. We acknowledge that. I overuse the word acknowledge, but I want people to know that I'm seeing what I'm seeing when I'm seeing it. And as long as we're doing taped commentary, which it will go away probably at some point. I don't know. But for right now, we need to be very specific in talking about what we're seeing through real time. The one thing that you're going to see from everybody is a port-de-bras, which absolutely means a movement or carriage of the arms, what the arms are doing. Okay, it's anything that the arms are doing. Brass winds, drummers, but if the sticks are being held in the hand like this, are they being held like this? Are they being held like this? Do you see some of all of it? Okay, is it effective when everybody's holding the sticks parallel to the ground? Yeah, when they look like they're kind of like the sticks are not an extension of the arm and the back, which is where the arms should be coming from, then you have a valid question. How's this supposed to look? What's going on here? Here's something that I wish I could actually demonstrate for you, because it sounds kind of bizarre. All movements, especially with the legs, are based on front, side, or back. Now you think about, now you're thinking angles and all that kind of stuff. Well, you create angles by moving the pelvis, okay? So my arm is here. If you can see my hand, my arm is here. But now I'm gonna go here. Now it looks to you like it's to the side. It's still in front of me, but I swiveled my pelvis around in the chair. It's still in front. The same thing with my arms to the side. I can move my torso. My arms are still to the side, but it's going to look different to you if you're in the front judging. That's when you need to reference orientation. And I'll tell you this, if everybody could just sort of try this, I mean, you might have to stand up to do this. I can tell when people are told to work on a 45-degree angle. Are they facing the corner of the field? Are they facing the corner of the stadium? Are they facing the corner of the form? They're going to all look different. There's an angle there, but they're not the same. Now, if I told every one of those people, let's say I'm in a cafeteria, and you know how most of them have the square tiles. If you are standing in a perfectly square, well, it doesn't matter what size your square is, because they're all going to fit one inside the other. But if you are standing inside a square box, let's say, or turn to the corner of your box, you're all going to look alike. Everybody's going to look exactly the same, because you're not facing the corner of the room, which is going to throw off your orientation. Port bras, everybody uses it. Lunges. There's all sorts of things that you see. There, alignment and placement is obviously keeping the knees over the toes. I'm going to have to jump ahead here a little bit. Okay, let's come back to lunges. What I want to talk about that you absolutely must bring to attention are the feet. The only time I use the word force, I think, in my entire life, I was trying to think of this the other day, is when I'm talking about feet. The heel is forced well forward, okay? It's forced forward. This is sickled, and it stretches the outside of the foot. For what we do, for what dancers do, and let me say it again, for what we do at the speed we're doing it, this is very, very dangerous. You're going to get twisted ankles, broken. It has to be turned out, even when they're traveling parallel. You don't want people marching on the outsides of their feet. You know, they always used to say that if you're a runner and you want to get a new pair of shoes, take your old shoes to the place, and they should be able to look at them and see where your weight is and help you with inserts or orthotics or whatever, so that you're not rocking on the outsides of your feet. Some people naturally do that. There's nothing natural about what we're doing. There's nothing natural about what we're doing. In fact, you know, people think it is, and I always say to them, well, it's probably better for you than French fries, but other than that, it's pretty scary. So you want to get the feet here. Don't want the sickled foot, and you want to make sure that they're feeling the tactile. That's why if I'm working inside with a band or a drum corps or color guard, I like to work barefoot if possible, so you can actually feel. But you need to make sure the surface is such. I don't like to see bare feet myself on grass. That that carries with it an element of risk that is beyond our control, beyond anybody's control. There could be glass, there could be rocks, there could be, there's all kinds of footwear and foot gear that you can purchase now that's going to give the look of a barefoot, if that's what you want, without actually having to take your shoes off. So working on alignment and placement is something that's going to be on the other sheet, but it's done at the very, very start of class. Now, those kinds of things, when I talk about starts and stops, okay, you can, on a stop, you can see if the feet are here, the feet are here. Go to the side. Is the back hyperextended? Okay. This is something that I see a lot. In an effort, and we see this, every drum corps, every band does this. They get to the front, they want to play the high notes, so they do, and they bend back, okay, to elevate the sound. Okay, that can all be done in the upper back. You don't have to bend your lower back to do that. And you can get, and you're going to get a better sound. Okay, it's up here, it's up, it's lifting this, not leaning back. Okay, so give them that crit and say, even as a visual person, you know, this, the trumpets are rounding this corner, they're bumping into the snares, that this is up there. I see that they're taking the horn away from their mouth. Not only is it disturbing the clarity of the form, they can't play. I can't play, you know? So let not only ensemble to field to effect visually, but also musically. You see things that are happening in the body that are affecting the tone. You know that it is, or people not playing or whatever. Give your location. Trombones are not, and if all the trombones are playing except one or two, you know, then they need to fake it a little bit better or whatever, you know. So yeah, getting that alignment and placement is going to be fundamental to everything that you do. The knees over the second toe, opening up the hip sockets. And I say this to you as 2 days ago, I had injections in both my hip socket. See, I used to dance on really, really bad surfaces. Don't, you know, you might be able to tell if people are hesitant. I use that word too. If people are moving across you in front and you see some of them that look very tentative when they start taking those last few strides to get into their set, it probably means that they overshot and took too big of steps originally. And when they left point A, by the time they got to point B, they were almost there. They had 4 more steps to take. It looks apologetic. It looks hesitant. Use some of those kinds of words that, you know, that can help people. Plies, we see this a lot. Demi is a small plie, grand is big. And in the grand plie, the heels stay on the ground. Now you're going to see this with brass players or wind players a lot, where they're in the second position. I've got my hands out, you can't see them. Well, maybe you can if I look at second position and they go, they rotate inward, outward. I mean, to the point of ad nauseum. I mean, really, we've seen it a lot. But it gives you the chance to see if they really know what they're doing. Okay, do they understand that even though they're rotating inward, the knee has to come with that? It's happening in the hip. There's a rotation. One can't happen without an understanding of the other. Feet are a good indication of what's going on in the upper part of the body as far as training. I let my eye go from down to up. Okay, it's just a real good indicator. All right, that inward outward rotation. Sometimes, and you can help people with this tremendously, they will overdo it. There's too much tension in that. There's this angst that's happening. Let them know they can relax. They can soften in the lower part of the body. And I also use the word harmony when I talk about the upper and the lower part of the body. What was the old word we used to use? I can't remember, but I kind of went, all right, I'm not supposed to use that, but I'm going to talk about this. Sometimes, let's say we're looking at a flag performer now, and it's a very intricate flag phrase, and it's just going like crazy. And the flag looks pretty good. The body, they've totally forgotten about every technical thing that they've ever been taught, and their emphasis goes on this. Same thing with winds. Okay, they're thinking more about one or the other. Technique should give you a comfort level of something that you can rely upon, that's going to help you through this process. And if you see that, make sure you're saying that. Okay, it's also, you guys have critiques, because it's a great talking point, you know.
Yes, we do.
Yes, good.
Michael, can I jump in for a second?
Yes, please.
Okay, so we all obviously come into this with our experiences and things of that nature. So when it comes to like a movement thing or a specific type of dance manipulation or whatever, and you want to give input on maybe how to improve upon it, but you don't feel I have that Michael Turner kind of background. So how can I really give them that kind of information to assist them in their growth?
Okay. Some things, one of the things I already talked about is people trying to get their legs too high. Okay, whether the leg be front, side, or back. Okay, it can be sharp, long, lean, knee is straight, and the foot can be 6 inches off the ground, not 36. Because when they do that, the hips start to go away. Look at that kind of thing. If people are balancing on one foot, balance is a skill. Balance, it takes some time to balance. I just lifted my right foot up off my floor, and I'm sitting down. It's so crazy. So, but balancing. Now, if you see people start to wobble, okay, one of the things I learned early on was if you're standing on one leg and the other leg is up and you start to wobble, the thing that's going to give you away is if you start doing that with the other leg, try to give yourself stability. What you should do is plie on the leg that you're standing on. That's going to help give you stability. That you can help people with. If you see them wobbling, sometimes you can actually let people, performers, help you tell them how to help them, like with this energy and this tension with the legs being so high. If when they, let's say they're doing, Juno, a releve, which is the reverse of a plie. Releve means to rise, and they're rolling on the outsides of their feet again. I can't stress that enough. A sickled foot, even if they're all doing it, this was the one thing we were always taught, even if they're all doing it, it is still bad. If they're all swinging their legs and their foot is like that, even if they tell you in critique, that's how we practice it, then you say, that's child endangerment. That's not a good thing. You got to keep the heel forward. You have to do that, or it's going to cause all kind of problems with the feet. Maybe, Juno, where you see turns, they're doing a lot of turns. Let's say you're up high and you're looking at the whole group. All of the turns occur in the form, and it's a walking turn. It's like turn 2, 3, 4, and keep going. You might suggest, you're doing there's, while I acknowledge the turns, there's a real sameness in the way that you're approaching those. Might you explore some other ways of turning? Now, do you have to say you could do chaîné turns, or you could do piqué turns, or you could do passe turns? Not necessarily. Okay, that might come as you develop your vernacular, your comfort level in speaking. But just say you're kind of doing the same thing. Same thing with equipment. I mean, you guys, how many times do we look at vertical tosses? Where's Marcy? Is she on here? Vertical tosses. Just one right after the other. And this, Juno, you brought this up about throwing a 6. Sixes are great, especially if they all go up and they all come down, they all catch. But what your job is going to be, judges, is just almost impossible. First of all, if I'm in the back of the field and I can look forward and see 6 rifles go up and then they come down, I might say, you know what, I'm so far away from the rifle line, but I see that the heights were great, or the heights were not. Now, I'm not up there, so I can't see what the problem was. But my suspect is that the release points were all different. I'll get up there eventually. Look at the release points, look at the heights, look at the catches. Now I'm going to try to show you this. I see this a lot when they catch and the shoulder goes down. Okay, so the equipment is affecting the body in a negative way. Okay, do you let the rifle hit? Do you stop the rifle, or do you let the gun stop you? I just asked her a question. You're gonna Juno, what's your group doing? I see you've got rifle. Some of them are doing this. Some people catch then plie. Some people plie then catch. Some people plie and catch at the same time. I'm seeing 3 different things there. And here's the other thing that I will do. Any of those 3 can succeed. It would be fine. Any one of them will work. Okay. But just make up your mind. Choice. The word choice will save you too. If you write some of the stuff on your score sheet, you have to make your choices clear. Just like the plie catch thing the example I just gave you. What do you want them to do? And sometimes it's not the designer, but it's the performer's interpretation of what they're being asked to do. Okay, they think they're doing fine. So variety, I think, is something that you can talk about. When I was talking about the turns, we see a lot of rond de jambe work from the winds a lot when they especially in maybe in ballads where the foot goes forward, it's going to go forward, side, and back. Now, if I've judged any of your groups, and I tell you, when your leg is to the side, it has to be slightly forward. It's not directly to the side. If I have I'm gripping the legs of a skeleton right now, and I bring the leg directly to the side, the pelvis is going to tilt. Does that make sense? If I have this leg of the skeleton and I pull it directly to the side, the pelvis is going to do that. Now, if I have this leg of the skeleton and I bring it to the side, but I bring it slightly forward, the pelvis doesn't move. It's still to the side. It's still the second position. That is technically where your legs need to be. Now, do you want to tilt? Does the movement want to tilt? Okay, then you can do that. I bring this leg up and directly to the side, and the pelvis goes with it, and I get a tilt. Those are two different things. One is tilting, one is the leg to second position. There's so much on here. I put grapevine travel. You see that a lot with the battery when you're standing behind them. I love hanging out with the drum line. Oh my gosh. I mean, it's just, I marvel, especially I put a group together years ago. They're still performing at the San Francisco 49ers. They're called Niner Noise. Go figure. I wrote down, I was in Palm Springs on vacation. I was like, I needed to put something on the audition notice. They are dressed out like they're football players. They take them on the road when they leave some of the cheerleaders behind. But just picking as we would go from place to place, and I would pick up some of those snare drums and go, damn, this is heavy, at least be aware of that. As human beings, there's lots of things. I don't know that we were never really meant to walk upright. You go back in history, so there's the hyperextending in the back is something that we have to combat. And I put on here, I know is when they're traveling, something that's worked for me is the sternum. If you put one hand on your sternum and the other hand on your belly button, keep your sternum just slightly front of the belly button. That will keep you from doing this. Centrifugal force. That's something else we have to think about on the turns. What does that do to the gesture leg? Are they using that leg to get around? Are they using the equipment to get around? Taking momentum from equipment, from a trumpet to take them into the turn in a very logical way. Logic. I'm making sheet notes for myself too. Logic. Are the performers following the logic? Sometimes I will say, it doesn't, I think your intention is another word. Your intention is this, but it looks like this. We're getting close to the time when I have to stop, but here's something that you can say as a judge that absolutely no one can argue with. This is one of those legal things. You can tell I've been beaten up, can't you? My perception of this, your perception is the way you see it and the way you think it. It belongs to you. If you say, it's my perception that you want this to occur and this to happen and this, maybe it's not what was intended by the designer, but that's the way it fell on your eyes. That belongs to you. Nobody can dispute that. All right. So just remember that. Please take a look at these things. I put some work into it. It belongs to you. I don't know, Juno, maybe through the course of the season or something, if anybody has questions about, it is a two-sided thing, because I went into movements that are especially done maybe in place, and then movement that can be done traveling when we start getting into chasses. But even in a chasse, which means to chase, we see that a lot, one foot chasing the other. People try to cover too much distance, or they try to get too far. And when you do that, it interrupts the purity of the movement. You can't play when you do that. You can't spin when you do that. So I put jazz or theatrical running. This is one of the things that I've learned that I've now changed. I call it theatrical running. Fosse called it jazz run, just like jazz hands. That came from a particular person, choreographer in a time. And to me, it's been overdone. So I will talk about are the fingers splayed? Are they what? I'm going to use my own way of thinking. If you want to call it a jazz hand or a jazz run, by all means do that until perhaps someone whaps you over the head and you get a different idea. Oh gosh, spotting. We can, if the focus goes along with that orientation thing, that's so important. It's as important as any line that performers are going to create with their arms or their legs. I mean, how many times do we see, you used to say, don't look at the ground, don't look at the ground, don't look at the ground, it's because I've done this and I've got this great line and then my eyes are like this. This line here is cutting through this line. So maybe you can't see that from the balcony or from the press box, but you can see it from where we see it from. So anyway,
guys, we're gonna have to wrap up in a minute.
I know.
Here. Once you have your final thoughts, Mike, I do have a couple of questions to pass along.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that.
Okay. The first one is kind of the correlation of what you're talking about with the visual efforts and how that can affect how a music judge might be analyzing things, understanding these skills you're talking about, because they have an effect on how they play. You've touched on it a couple times, but can you give a quick dive a little bit deeper into that, how the music people, the importance of them understanding a lot of this as well?
Okay, I can't see everybody there, so I don't know if some of you would call yourselves music people. But I know, I mean, I played trumpet, but I sucked. So I started dancing. But I like music. I think we have a little bit of a, pardon the pun, leg up. Everything we do is body-based. If you're juggling, if you're gargling, it comes from the body, okay? So I think we can be more of a help to the music, to the sound, and be able to be more helpful, perhaps, than a field winds person. They're going to hear, but they don't always see. They're not looking at, they hear intonation. They hear. We couldn't exist without them. But I think, I know you got other questions. I think we can be more of a help there by looking at some of these things that I've talked about: alignment, placement, orientation, the rib cage being open, all those sorts of things. Anatomically, you look at it that way, you're going to be a huge help.
Yeah,
and I just jump in real quick, Blair.
Yeah.
Okay. If you guys do, after shows, we love hanging out with each other. And one area where I was able to grow quite a bit was to talking to the music judges after a show. And maybe I didn't understand the musical phrase, or I didn't understand what they were playing at a certain time or a certain speed or different tempos or whatever it might have been. And I just talked to the music guys, and they would, they'd be up front with me, and then you could tell them visually, well, this is the responsibility visually while they're playing that musical phrase. And that's how we all learn together. And that's always been helpful for me. Talk to the music people, talk to the drum people. Don't be afraid to talk to those guys as well, and talk to the guard people for sure.
Yeah, and the final question was just a little bit of an elaboration on something you talked about earlier when you're talking about safety. Can you talk about the role of a judge in speaking to something that might come across as dangerous, whether it's the way they're doing a skill that could be harmful to them, or even, we've seen it with props, unsafe prop conditions, what responsibility falls on the adjudicator to speak to that?
You just answered your own question beautifully. In the question was the answer. Bring it up. Bring it up. I think we
Okay.
owe them that. I think we can, we didn't really get a chance last time to talk a whole lot about production value. In that, because people are climbing on sets and stuff like that. I have put my hand on something and wiggled it or checked it out, or look behind it and go, those steps are unsafe. It's that some of those drum major podiums, even if you feel like there's a safety issue with there, say it. But certainly with a lot of this other stuff, though, if they're attempting to, if you see them throwing that 6 that Juno talked about earlier, and they're doing this underneath it, they don't know, they don't have the information they need to do it as safely as they need to be doing it.
Yes. Yeah, and one thing I'll jump in on that is, if anybody has gotten tapes from me, I am certainly more blameful of the staff than the student, because the student gets the information from the staff. And if the student doesn't have the information, like Michael just said, they're not going to be able to do the skill. So don't be afraid. I mean, you don't want to confront a staff member, but you do want to discuss with them, hey, listen, there are other things than just seeing someone else do this skill that you can all of a sudden do this skill.
All right, guys, we got to finish up because I know the other session is waiting for us
Yes.
now.